What if the healthiest choice your parents ever made was actually the most dangerous? Imagine it's 1975. The experts, the doctors, the government, they're all telling you to stop eating butter and to start eating this margarine. They call it a miracle of modern science. Heart healthy, they say. So you make the switch. You think you're protecting your family. What you're really doing is joining the largest and deadliest public health experiment in history. An experiment that lasted for 50 years. To understand how this happened, you need to meet one man. His name was Ancel Keys. In the 1950s, he declared war on fat. Keys had a simple, elegant theory, the diet-heart hypothesis. It claimed that eating saturated fat, like the kind in butter, raised your cholesterol, and that cholesterol caused heart disease. It was a simple answer to a terrifying problem, and the world was desperate to believe him. He became a scientific celebrity. He even landed on the cover of Time magazine. His proof? A massive project called the 7-Country Study. It showed a clean, perfect line. The more saturated fat a country ate, the more heart disease it had. The evidence seemed undeniable. Case closed. But there was a secret at the very heart of the study. Keys had data from 22 countries, but he only published the results from the 7 that fit his theory. He ignored countries like France and West Germany, countries that ate massive amounts of fat, but had very low rates of heart disease. In statistics, this has a name: selection bias. It's a scientific sin where you present only the data that proves your point, while conveniently ignoring the data that doesn't. But the lie was already loose. The war on butter had begun, and a new industrial hero was waiting in the wings to take its place. With butter branded a public enemy, the world needed a replacement. And the food industry didn't need to invent one. They already had the perfect weapon waiting in their arsenal. A cheap butter substitute that had been around for decades. Its name was margarine, and it was about to get a massive, heart-healthy rebrand. It was cheap to make. Derived from industrial vegetable oils like cottonseed and soybean. But there was one major problem. Those oils are liquid at room temperature. You can't spread oil on your morning toast, so scientists invented a solution. A process called partial hydrogenation. They took liquid vegetable oil and blasted it with hydrogen gas. This forced the oil to become a solid, spreadable fat. A perfect imposter for butter. It was a triumph of food engineering. But in that violent chemical reaction, something new was created. Something the human body had never seen before. An artificial fat with a twisted, unnatural shape. A shape called trans fat. For decades, no one knew what it was, or what it was doing to our bodies. But we now know the truth. Trans fat is a metabolic poison. It delivers a unique, devastating double blow to your health. It dramatically raises your LDL, the bad cholesterol that clogs arteries. And at the exact same time, it lowers your HDL, the good cholesterol that cleans them out. It was the perfect recipe for a heart attack. And it was being sold to the American public as a health food. For a scientific theory to become a cultural belief, it needs a powerful messenger. Ancel Keys' flawed hypothesis found the most powerful messenger imaginable. The American Heart Association, the AHA, the one institution that doctors and the public trusted implicitly on heart health. In 1961, the AHA released its first-ever dietary guidelines. The message was clear. They advised all Americans to reduce saturated fat and to replace butter with margarine. With the AHA's seal of approval, the debate was over. It was now medical fact. But this alliance didn't happen overnight. To understand it, you have to follow the money. For years, the AHA was a small, quiet society of doctors. Then, in 1948, its fortunes changed, thanks to a hit radio show. Truth or Consequences. It was a game show where contestants who failed a quiz had to face a silly on-air stunt, but the host turned the consequences into a national fundraising game. For the AHA, he created the Mr. Hush contest. Listeners mailed in donations for a chance to guess a secret celebrity's identity, and the show's sponsor, Procter & Gamble, the makers of Crisco. Suddenly, the obscure AHA was flooded with over $1.5 million. That single P&G-sponsored game show turned the AHA into a national powerhouse, and a very profitable alliance was born. The leading health authority on heart disease was now financially intertwined with the very companies whose products it would soon recommend. The vegetable oil industry had the perfect narrative, and with the AHA as their partner, they launched one of the most successful marketing campaigns in history. Ads for this spread were everywhere. Promise told you to get heart smart. Bluebonnet launched one of the most iconic jingles of the era. "Everything's better with Bluebonnet on it," they sang, as a droopy flower magically perked up after a taste. It was a masterclass in propaganda, selling a fantasy of a wholesome, almost magical life. A life without the fear of heart disease. A life where the villain, butter, was replaced by a modern, scientific hero. And for decades, America believed it, consuming millions of tons of industrial trans fat, under the misguided belief that it was the healthy choice. An entire generation was part of an experiment, and the results were about to be catastrophic. The propaganda worked. Throughout the 60s and 70s, America followed the advice. We dutifully replaced the butter in our fridges with tubs of this stuff. The numbers are staggering. By 1976, the average American was eating over 12 pounds of it a year, and less than 5 pounds of butter. The switch was a massive success for the corporations, but a disaster for public health, because for decades no one was tracking the effect of all that industrial trans fat, until the 1990s, when a new hero entered our story, Dr. Walter Willett, a researcher at Harvard University. His research, which followed over 85,000 women for nearly a decade, provided a shocking, undeniable conclusion. Those who ate the most trans fats, mainly from margarine and shortening, had a 50% higher risk of having a heart attack. Let me repeat that, a 50% higher risk. This wasn't a theory anymore, it was a body count, it was a scientific kill shot. In his own words, Dr. Willett called the switch from butter to margarine a massive, uncontrolled experiment on the American population. The evidence was now undeniable, and the Great Deception was beginning to unravel. Dr. Willett's Harvard study was the first domino to fall. Suddenly, the scientific consensus that had stood for a generation began to crack. The evidence against trans fats became too overwhelming to ignore. In 2006, the FDA was forced to act. They mandated that trans fats be listed on every nutrition label. For the first time, the poison had a name right there on the box. Then, in 2015, the final nail in the coffin. The FDA officially declared that artificial trans fats were no longer generally recognized as safe for human consumption. It was a stunning reversal, a quiet admission that the advice given for 50 years was dangerously wrong. And what about the corporations that waged that war? Companies like Unilever, who made billions selling you this trans fat-laden spread. Well, today, they're selling you the next chapter of the story. Plant-based and olive oil spreads, marketed with a brand new health halo. It is the ultimate corporate pivot. First, they sold you the poison that made millions sick. And now, they're selling you the cure. Or at least, that's what the label wants you to believe. A story for another time. So, the next time you walk down the dairy aisle, and you see a simple stick of butter next to a tub of modern, plant-based spread, you'll know the history. A 50-year war fought not in the name of science, but in the name of profit. you'll know the danger of a flawed idea backed by corporate power.